this is a director's cut of Giant Spider Invasion. I'm Bill Rebane. I made this picture in 1975. It was the third feature film that the opening here is a little different than the original picture, which most people remember starting out with Hey Little Buddy by Alan Hale from Gilligan's Island. Just let this play for a while and see where it goes.
Bingo 68 Omaha. Our magnetic compass is erratic and our radar is on the grid.
What have you done in 1975, Bill? What have you done?
Well, before this, we did a little picture called Invasion from Inner Earth, which had probably the lowest budget that I can think of. It was about a little under $50,000. And before that, I did a film in Chicago called Terror at Half Day, which was sold to Herschel G. Lewis, and he retitled and re-edited, and the title now is Monster at Go-Go, something I don't want to remember very much. Anyway, Giant Spider Invasion was initially started out as a little different picture until a distributor got into the game and wanted a real big giant spider, a spider bigger than Jaws. And fortunately, we had planned to do a film with tarantulas, and only tarantulas, small ones that is, and as we went along and dealing with the distributor, the spider got bigger and bigger until the distributor asked for a spider. It's got to be bigger than at least 20 feet, and then it became 25 feet, then became 30 feet. The problem was that we had a $300,000 budget available for this picture. And I think the effects budget was about $10,000. So how do you make a spider 30 feet in diameter for $10,000 and make it look real?
Hallelujah! The joy that you're feeling right now.
I think the first challenge, once the concept of Giant Spider was born, was to get a cast assembled that would hold water in those days, and as a theatrical picture. I had quite a few good friends in Hollywood, especially Steve Brody was an old friend of mine, Alan Hale Jr., and we simply, once we had a first draft of a conceptual idea of a screenplay, we got together, had a few drinks, and said, well, let's have some fun in Wisconsin and do it. And that's how the cast got together, and one cast member got another cast member. Robert Easton came on board because the original writer that was helping with the screenplay, Richard Huff and Madison, this was his first screenplay attempt at a feature motion picture, and it wasn't what we're seeing on the screen now. So the distributor, again, Brandon Chase, insisted that we bring in another writer or start talking about a different storyline altogether. And it was Robert Easton that came on board, both as an actor and writer.
And brimstone, that is what is in store for you.
And we brought him to Tomahawk, Wisconsin.
Psalms 11, verse 6. Upon the wicked he shall rain fire and brimstone.
Now, the only problem was with that Robert Easton, who was responsible really for some of the elements of the picture that made it a cult classic,
Would you bring me something?
didn't get along quite well with Richard Huff, who had
Listen.
less conservative ideas about the film. So when we brought them together, they were fighting it from the first moment on, and Richard Huff was writing in Madison, Wisconsin, and Bob Easton was on location in Tomahawk, Wisconsin. He had a nice little cabin on the lake that we got him. And one of the producers, we had 4 of them, demanded that he write at least 5 or 6 pages a day.
I can hardly wait to get saved again tomorrow night.
And when he did so, he sent him to Madison. Richard Huff didn't like him, so they went back to Tomahawk, and essentially what happened was we ended up really without a screenplay. Bob Easton would write as fast as he can and come up with some great ideas that we talk over on the set sometimes, and the picture was shot off the cuff. There were 3 pages, 3-4 pages that I got fed periodically. It was difficult to maintain continuity and lead the actors into a direction which I personally didn't even know where it was going, what ending we would have and where it would end up. So it was a difficult chore, but we were all determined to
How was it?
trying to make a good picture.
What is
And the cast was
Sin.
unbelievably cooperative and talented, and they certainly did their professional job. But without having a cohesive screenplay from the very beginning was very difficult. Now, here are these effects, by the way, they were put in by the distributor after we finished principal photography here.
How do they do that? How do they fly them in?
Oh, CFI, I think, did that optically, the old-fashioned way in the lab. Now, Kevin Brody and Diane Lee Hart, for instance, I anticipated to be 2 of the lead actors, the hero and the heroine. And as we see in the picture, they appeared in the beginning of the picture and kind of got lost in the middle and then reappeared toward the end. But they weren't really the hero and the heroine that I expected them to be when we started out with the concept. Now, the production values, I thought at that time, were always reasonably good. But with the overall problems that were looking us in the face at that time, I wasn't at all sure what we were going to have when we finished up with the picture.
And how did the cast feel about not having a proper script to work off of?
Well, that's where the professionalism showed. I mean, they weren't happy about it, let's put it that way, but Bob Easton was the main contributor to making it happen. He would come up to me and almost on a daily basis and pull me to the side and he says, "Bill, what do you think of this if we put these lines in it?" And I would listen to him, we'd kick it around a little bit, and I said, "You know, that sounds great. Why don't we do it?" He said, "Will you get in trouble?" He says, "Will you get in trouble doing it?" I said, "Shit, no." I said, "Let's go, do it. Try it out." And most of it, I would say that probably the most takes we did was about 5 or 6. Now, considering that the crew, our assistant cameraman, Jack Willoughby, was a DP, he was an experienced super pro. I had an assistant cameraman by the name of Carl Kitt, who had a camera van that had a private bar in it that was stocked with the best of liquor you could find. And he freely passed it out amongst the crew.
All I can tell you is call Joe's radio shop.
So that was not a exactly a positive thing to do on
Car won't
any
start?
production.
All I can tell you is, call Ernie's Auto
That didn't help the
Repair. He opens
situation
at 8.
any.
No, ma'am, I don't have the number. All I can tell you is...
We had a very frustrated special effects
Figures do the
guy
walking.
by the name of Dick Albane from LA, who drove a special effects truck from his company out from LA to Gleason, Wisconsin, who was extremely frustrated because he had no idea how to make the spider. And by the way, the spider that we will see later on in the picture was made, the production of the spider was started about 2 weeks before the shoot.
Put the gun away.
What the hell are you doing?
So I think
sneaking
we
in
started
here?
shooting without having a full spider.
Walk home.
It was still being welded and
I warned you.
soldered together
It's not as rotten.
and needed to be furred
Dave's fault. His car
by some
broke
local
down.
ladies that volunteered.
You fell for that dumb old trick.
And the Volkswagen idea came out of the clear blue sky because we were so frustrated not knowing how to make a 30-foot spider. It was never meant to be a 30-foot spider to begin with.
That's just exactly where a horny little punk like that would farm.
So the Volkswagen idea came up 2 or 3 weeks before the shoot.
I want to put you my
What could we do with a VW chassis?
the hell out of you.
And I had a good friend who was a self-made special effects impresario who actually came up. He says, what if we took a VW chassis
And have
and
any peace in his own house?
took conduit, welded a new spider body on it, and then made the legs move from the inside? Well, how are we going to do that? Well, then it developed that springs could possibly move the legs
Yes, this is Dr. Langer
from the
Montclair
inside.
Observatory again. I've got a
How do you
cavalry
move them from
shower
the
that
inside?
will
Well,
drop an inch in less than 20 minutes.
We
I
no
think
budget
that's
for
right,
hydraulics
right.
or
And none of the
any
other
new
phenomena
inventions.
I'm reporting correlate with any previously observed
So
data.
ultimately, we realized that only if we took kids small enough to fit inside the chassis of the VW with a spring and leverage system could move these legs. So it ended up that we needed, I think it was 6 kids inside to move the spider legs whenever it moved, plus the driver. So we had 7 people in the VW.
Talk to plants? Right. Not you, Vance. You haven't fallen for that metaphysical nonsense.
As normally the case is,
Now, what made you take the long walk
here's a
down the
good
hall?
example of,
More freaky stuff from
when
northern
several
Wisconsin.
pages of script came down as to what the interaction is of the
And what's the source?
other cast
Montclair
members.
Observatory and Dr. J. Langer.
We shot it arbitrarily. My wife was the production manager.
We have a heavy gamma
She
ray
was
shower,
tearing her hair out
incredibly
because
fast drop in barometric pressure, an aurora with no
there
sun
wasn't a
activity,
cohesive,
and an amazingly potent
production
unknown
schedule.
ground-level X-ray source nearby.
So essentially, we just winged it all the way through.
Oh,
And you can even tell by the scene here with Steve Brody.
Yeah.
was it the same blood?
A lot of it was ad-lib too.
Oh, you're right.
That came out of total frustration. That's why I call it, instead of the giant spider invasion, I call it the giant spider disaster.
Any report of a crash in that area?
No.
What's the closest town?
Horton. You better pack your suitcase.
We were very fortunate because we had such good cooperation in Lincoln County, Wisconsin, that
I've already arranged
made
your
all this
transportation.
possible. Everything was
Thanks a lot.
available within the short distance of the studio. The cooperation from the people in Lincoln County and the town of Gleason was just fantastic. Otherwise, we could have never accomplished that.
Did you film your first movie in Wisconsin?
Already.
No, the first one actually was filmed and we did in Chicago. Full union crew, 35 millimeter. Meant to be a serious science fiction picture
Got to keep up my strength.
with June Travis, who was an old-time Hollywood movie actress. I think think she was the sister-in-law of Elaine Stewart.
So was this the first proper feature made in the area?
It was the first feature film made in Chicago, full union crew, legitimate feature film made in Chicago after 30 years of dormancy, after the Charlie Chaplin studio, S&S, closed. So there was a 30-year time span in Chicago where nothing happened.
So why did you go from Chicago to Wisconsin?
Well, that was a few years later, after I had traveled back and forth to Europe, because we had a studio in Europe at the time that I was working with and for, and later owned a piece of the action of. I had been traveling so much, as a matter of fact, that I needed a rest at an early age, and I went on a fishing trip to Wisconsin, and by pure accident found an old farm with a trout stream and nice wooded property that I bought at a spur of a moment, and called my wife from Wisconsin and said, honey, we just bought a farm. So we packed up, moved to Wisconsin, and it was initially 80 acres, and it was an old ramshackle house. Very good for the kids. I had 2 kids by then, and we kind of winged it for a while, in similar to Green Acres, the old television show. It was very much like that. And in the meantime, however, I was very successful at that time in producing and directing and shooting industrial films and for clients. I had a good friend in Chicago who kept me very busy. So I was commuting at first between Gleason, Wisconsin, and Chicago almost on a weekly basis. Until I said, well, this is not enough to fill my schedule, so I was itching to do another theatrical venture. So the second picture was the film called Invasion from Inner Earth, a $50,000 wonder. After that, we did another 5 or 6 corporate image films, and actually they were bank training films, to be exact. But it led to looking for something that had more oomph and could get into the mainstream market. And that was the beginning of Giant Spider Invasion. Richard Huff in Madison was an industrial film producer, commercial film producer, who was also itching to get into the feature film business. We brainstormed a storyline, and it was nothing like what we see on the screen right now. But nevertheless, that's what it turned out to be. I think if it wouldn't have been for the differences between Bob Easton and Dick Huff, it may have turned out altogether different. But could have, would have, should have doesn't come into the picture. It happened, that's what it is, and that's where we are today. Fortunately, Bob Easton had the foresight, especially once he knew about the spider situation, that we can't make a 30-foot spider believable for a $10,000 special effects budget. He realized that it had to have some other elements. And it was campy. He was camp-oriented. If it wouldn't have been for his dialogue lines that he came up with and his ideas, Giant Spider would have never been a cult classic. That's for real, because the lines like Rice Krispie or rabbit turds are still in the minds of many
We have already lost one airplane.
many of the
I didn't know that.
fans that I hear from these days. We had, and then this was, I mean, by the way, these were real cow guts. As a matter of fact, my wife had to go with 2 crew members to the local slaughterhouse
I can't tell what kind
and
of
get
critter could have done that.
4 barrels or 4 or 5 barrels of real cow guts and remains.
It's gonna cost us.
And it was about 105 degrees that summer.
9 dead animals ain't gonna
We
cost us
unloaded
nothing.
You're so
the
dumb, you
5
wouldn't
barrels
know
of
rabbit
cow
turds from
guts
Rice
and had to
Krispies.
spread them on the field.
I'll butcher
And let
up
me
the meat
tell
like
you,
I always do.
5 seconds after they got dropped, the flies were on them
And now what
by the
kills those
millions.
cows?
And
There might be something
the
horrible
smell was
going
so bad,
Well, that's
they couldn't,
Dutch's
you
lookout,
can see
not
Leslie's
mine.
parents standing about 10 feet away from them. And it was bad news all the way.
I've never seen so much fouled up data in my life. Against every
My
law
wife, who was
of
the
business.
production manager on this, by the way, she had a lot of guts herself to
We
be
tried
doing
to
this.
brainstorm it.
But she was a very devoted trooper.
That's all brain.
So
Right.
it got done, and it, to some degree, I hope it was effective.
What are we gonna do?
But never intended, never planned. It was one of those things, what are we going to do for this or
Do you
that?
have a Geiger counter?
It just happened.
How many films have been made in the state of
Let's see
Wisconsin
if your
leading up
local
to that?
sheriff will support us.
I think Invasion from Inner Earth, the previous one to this,
I know just.
was the first Wisconsin feature that was ever made. And that was premiered in Wausau, Wisconsin, at the Grand Theater there. As a matter of fact, it was the first feature made in Wisconsin, fully as a Wisconsin homegrown feature. So, and what made it pleasant was that wherever we went, in Lincoln County, Oneida County, where the college, Gogebic College was, which is what we're seeing here with Steve Brody and Barbara Hale. The cooperation, the locations, everything was so great that we were able to pull it off just because of that. I know attempting to do something similar or the same thing in Hollywood at that time would have cost us a fortune. That budget would have never done. I mean, independent production was the only way to get something like this accomplished. As a matter of fact, during the shoot of Giant Spider Invasion, I believe Steven Spielberg was doing the first version of Jaws in Florida. And the crew, which was comprised of Canadians, New Yorkers, LA people, and local Wisconsin people, we all got a kick out of the fact that when Steven Spielberg ran into problems with the first Jaws and the shark wouldn't work, we were laughing because there's a guy who's got a big studio behind him, he's got a lot of money behind him, he's got problem, and here we are doing something for $300,000. We don't have any problems. So, and as a matter of fact, as we all know, Spielberg had to redo the first version, and well, Universal had the money to put behind him, and he was able to do it. We were kind of, in plain English, pissed off that we couldn't do the same thing or didn't have the same kind of backing.
Does that gospel wonderful? I don't know, but I'll tell you.
So what month of the year were you making this?
This was June, July,
Oh, so it was hot.
which in this case, in that year, turned out to be one of the hottest summers. 105, and now the spider itself, with the 5 kids in it,
No, it's not going to work.
or 7 people actually in the body of the front part of the spider, and the fur covering, the black fur. Those poor kids, I was always afraid that one of them is going to get sick and have a stroke or something, a sunstroke.
And a chisel.
So it was a real chore for those kids. And when they emerged out of the vehicle, let me tell you, they were just, clothes and all, totally wet, soaked. Now here's an impromptu scene with Bob Easton, wonderful as he was, wasn't quite coordinated with tools. As you can see, he's just trying to hit that geo to split it and open it.
Hey, look.
There was a little continuity mistake here too. Here he picks it up, the geode is cut flat.
I don't know.
Whereas in the previous shot, the geode had
Be hard
the
enough.
zigzag
No,
natural
Diamond
cuts
just
in it.
cut glass.
That's right.
You said you had a budget of $300,000. Did you come over or under budget by the end?
We were right on the button. I think if we went over, it was like $5,000 or $10,000 at max.
Langer? Join me, please.
And what month did it hit theatrically?
This is your brother from Orange
October. Opened in Dallas, I think in 50 theaters. And the Dallas newspaper had, the distributor had created a great little comic strip on it.
We have to talk to you about last
And the grosses were quite phenomenal.
That preacher man to tone it down tonight.
I think I moved to New Orleans
Oh, no?
and hit all the other major areas. I was given to understand at that time I wasn't too involved in distribution, but I think they made 250 or 300 prints to start with. That got shuffled around the country.
Oh, we don't have any Geigers around here. Never did have in these parts.
No,
Now here's another pretty much impromptu scene, and it's very stilted.
to count the Vance, I have a feeling.
But there was not enough time to do
Sure, he's taking physics.
more than, especially in this sequence, I remember that I didn't have time to do any more than 3 takes in the whole thing.
We're gonna be rich, Dad. We're gonna be
Now
rich.
Steve Brody, of
What do you
course, was
mean,
a heavy
we?
drinker
As far as
from the
mine.
beginning, and he had a tough
Everything
time.
that's of it is mine.
Barbara Hale, who was a real sport,
Nobody ever found diamonds around here before. I guess they came out of that weird
she
fireball
did
thing.
have a tough time coping with
Take these in to Cousin Billy at the rock shop.
Steve Brody's drinking
You
habits.
can tell me just
And on top of that, her husband,
But
Bill
don't-
Williams,
don't tell
who
Cousin Billy where you found him. That'll be our secret.
was the bartender in the picture,
Oh, don't look at me
who
like
was with
that,
her.
Dad. You and me are gonna be rich.
he was also a heavy drinker, so there were some domestic problems
I never meant any of those nasty things I
that
used
had to
say.
be
Dad.
solved during the
I was
shoot.
teasing.
And on top of it, Steve,
Everything can be wonderful.
was
again,
heavy
just
into
like
the
it was
booze.
before the baby died.
that made it
Look,
very
Al,
difficult,
We don't even know if the
even with the script, to get him to do anything. In the famous scene of the spider coming over the hill, and Barbara Hale and Steve Brody running up toward it,
This is Dave Perkins, his father runs.
that was another very hot day where Steve had put,
Dr. Vance from
I
there.
think, a bottle of scotch away before we did that scene. And we actually thought we were going to lose him
can publish in the paper?
because he was so exhausted from heat and booze. He rolled down the hill,
That's safe enough. Nobody reads your ads anyway.
and we were afraid he was going to have a heart attack right there.
Could I speak to you for a moment?
Sure, Dr. Vance.
Excuse us for a moment.
But as you can see, it just continued, and we made it happen.
Is he always that serious?
But that's why I call it the giant spider disaster, because that's,
You know, I wonder if what happened to Terry and I last night had something to do with what you're talking about.
that was truly like pulling
What
teeth.
happened to you and Terry?
Well, we were parked by the junkyard. The lights went
With
dead.
a
The
plain
radio
old
wouldn't work,
piece
the
of
engine wouldn't
pliers.
start. A wind came up and started.
When you were looking at the dailies, did you ever feel that you'd never get a final edit and you'd never be able to make the deadline?
What dailies?
None.
I don't think I had an opportunity to look at dailies until half the shoot was over. And then everything was too late. The funniest story was the first day of shooting, which was almost everything in this set that we built in the small stage.
Place full of spiders.
We were ready to go, and I said, okay, sounds ready?
No,
Sure.
big, black hairy ones with furry legs.
Then it wasn't ready. I said, what's holding up sound? Well, we got microphone problems. I said, why do we have microphone problems? We only need 1 mic. He said, oh, no, we're shooting this in stereo. I said, we are? Who ordered stereo?
Sheriff's office.
Well, our associate
yes, Mr.
producer,
Cooper, how
Tony
are you?
Cromreiter. I said, but I didn't order it. And it was never an understanding
When
to
you
shoot
see him
this in
last?
stereo. So we had to scrap the whole first day of shooting
Well, I'll be glad to drive out and take a look for him. What
because
color is his
simply
motorcycle?
we had problems with the stereo recorder, which was rented
dear,
from
please,
Chicago,
stop worrying. I'm sure he'll turn up safe and sound.
and they couldn't do a transfer.
Yes, I'll get in touch with you.
Anyway, we had to scrap the whole first day of shooting and get to Minoru, sound set up, and then order new equipment because the Canadian sound people that we had prepared everything for stereo. They ordered the mics, and they were planting mics under everybody's chair. It was a total sound disaster. And I had never shot stereo before, so I said, give me an 815 Sennheiser. That's it. That's all we need. One boom, and that's the way it's going to go. So it took a couple of days of aggravation, rethinking the whole thing and starting from scratch again.
Where did you see the first final cut?
I had we went to California to cut the picture, and that's when I first saw all the footage. And Barbara Pokris, the editor, was hired by Brandon Chase, the distributor, to physically cut it, although I would have preferred to have done it. And it went fine. That's when the first time I saw all the footage. And I spent a great deal of time in Hollywood going back and forth, and we were missing some shots. I had to fly back to Gleason, Wisconsin, and shoot some additional footage, by the way, which includes the spider web in the field in the morning, wheels spinning in the car when Cousin Billy got stuck in the spider web with the car, and before he hit the gas station and exploded his car. And then I found out, when I was coming back to shoot inserts in Wisconsin, that in Hollywood they were what is called behind cutting.
Are you out of your mind?
Which means that when the director is not there,
And I hit
the distributor and the editor start playing around with the picture and start cutting it the way they feel fit. Well, that's a big no-no for the Directors Guild.
Grass were growing.
But there was very little I could do about it because time was short. There was a release date set for the picture. As it was, I had to be flying back and forth to get insert shots and close out what needed to be done business-wise in the production. I still think the most effective cuts really were with the real tarantulas in the geodes, because they worked for everybody. They worked for the audience, they worked for the cast. It was real. I think the Leslie Parrish shot in the bedroom is certainly one that was very effective. But that's how the original story started. My concept was to do a thriller and a scary movie with real tarantulas. That big spider was never in the plans from the very beginning. And I think, personally, it screwed up the whole concept because we had to concentrate more. How do we make this 30-foot spider, and lost track of the real suspense and the real scariness of these little spiders, what they could do.
Well, I told the Lush that I had to come in and see my cousin
So
about
that-
some hot rocks.
There went the creature feature that I had in mind.
Now, when you're looking at your director's cut and you're thinking about when you were doing the final edit for the film that was going to go out theatrically, how do you feel today versus how you felt 32 years ago, 35 years ago?
Well, I think I'm amazed that we got it done. I am truly amazed today that I look back at some of these things and remember clearly how it happened and why it happened, and how stressed out some of us were, including myself, were about the situation, the shooting conditions. It was a lot of agony combined with the drive that we've got to get this picture done, we got to get it right, but nothing ever went right. So it was a tough chore, very tough chore. I guess with the way it turned out today, that it has become somewhat of a cult classic. I have to thank Bob Easton over and over again, because he was so contemporary, he was so right when he said, this will never hold up unless we make fun of ourselves. And that's the way I look at it today. I said, I have to make fun of the picture and myself. But I am proud, on the other hand, that we finished it. And for those days, I guess a lot of people got a lot of enjoyment out of it, seeing in drive-ins and on the big screen.
Bill, you mentioned last night to me about Johnny Carson talking about it on The Tonight Show.
Well, that's the first time I found out about how well it was doing. I mean, I saw press releases, I saw articles from various towns and cities, but when I realized that what kind of a success it had become, it was not until the Johnny Carson show came on, and Johnny Carson says, well, here's a story, would you believe this? He said, $300,000 movie made in Wisconsin, would you believe $22 million gross? Well, that was the tip of the iceberg, and I kept saying, where's my money? Where's my money? The film had 4 producers, and that wasn't enough. The 4 producers hired a line producer from Canada by the name of Tony Cromrider, who was as far as I'm concerned, we got along fine, but he overstepped his bounds a few times, and like he decided to make the film in stereo without telling the director or the writers or the other producers. The stereo just showed up. I eventually fired Tony on the last week of production. It was unbearable because we kept changing scenes all the time, and
I always give you a big tip.
Thank you, darling.
and finished up at the Gleason Days, which was the big scene where we had all the extras, and Kevin Brody, Steve Brody's son, was very helpful. He was the assistant director, and very sharp, very talented young man. Had been an actor for most of his young childhood and had a lot of picture credits. He was extremely helpful and made it possible to have all the coordination of the crowd scenes and getting the Spider. We got a few tickets transporting the Spider down the main roads of Lincoln County because it was oversized load on a busy highway, so that didn't fare well, of course.
This drew a lot of attention from the townspeople and the newspapers, so the town was very heavily involved with the production and the final product ultimately, Bill, right? Wasn't it?
Oh yes, everybody, the cooperation was just unbelievable. I mean, almost anything we needed and wanted was available to us. And that continued, by the way, throughout the entire lifespan of the studio in Gleason, and spread out over all the pictures that I made there. And that's what gave us the impetus and the enthusiasm to build a small industry there of movie making.
A barrel full of these. Yeah.
How many films were made in Gleason?
Altogether, 12. 12 features. That's not counting dozens and dozens of industrial films, documentaries, commercials, corporate image films, and so on.
And the 12 features, were you involved with the production of all 12?
Yes, all of them. I think 5 of them I did the DPing on, director of photography as well.
That's more a couple of square miles. I know. So can we pinpoint it?
What do you feel personally has been the most successful film from your point of view?
Well, without question, Giant Spider Invasion made the most money. Became an international picture.
Where the hell is that?
Aside from Spider, I would say Nightmare with Tiny Tim is probably the next most successful, even though right after Giant Spiders, The Alpha Incident was a science fiction drama, which I think came out more than reasonably well, became a mainstream theatrical picture, and was a co-feature to Star Wars. It was a little slow as far as I'm concerned, but I needed a picture that I could do for a low budget, in limited locations or an isolated location. And considering both the budget and the actors and the performances, it came off very well, and therefore Paramount picked it up for a co-feature release to Star Wars. And that enjoyed international distribution, theatrical release, and everything. So I don't know if it's Nightmare or Alpha that got the bigger share of the pie. But Nightmare is still going strong, and we did a director's cut on that, and that's toned it down a little bit. Took a little of the slasher stuff out, and it does have nudity, but limited nudity is not a big deal, and nothing more than you can't see on television today, prime time. So I think those 2 pictures have maybe equal in exposure.
You think you're gonna
I
fool me
think
with that phony rhinestone?
here's another impromptu scene here with Bob Easton and Diane Lee Hart with the diamond and the rack focus shot that Jack Willoughby and I worked on to do some things a little bit, give it a little bit of artistry, and there were times when we had a little bit of time to think about shots and plan things, like in the laboratory where Jack was an extremely talented and gifted DP, and he would come to me and say, "Bill, what do you think of this? I have an idea." And I was always open to ideas from my crew or my coworkers. It wasn't all. It's never a one-man shot of making a film. Some of the crew people have also got ideas. They may not direct it, but they come up with some great ideas. So, and I was always open to these type of things, and worked with everyone to give it our best, to come up with better ways of doing it. And that became very enjoyable and was pretty much a method of operation throughout through my entire career of filmmaking in Gleason, and even today, I would depend greatly on my coworkers and the people that I work with.
What is your feeling watching this now? And do you think that the fact that with home video and now the internet, do you find it funny? Are you perplexed that this film is still being watched by generations and generations 32 years later?
Yes, and I admire, I have to give credit to those people who think it's worth anything, because all I see, mostly what I see is I see mistakes, and I ask myself, how in the hell could you do that? Or how could you approve it? and say yes to, or say yes, that's a take. But you know the old story with hindsight. Could have, should have done it is not good enough. I mean, here, you know, this piece of paper that I quickly created with ink and ink blots to use as a scientific underlying document or something. That was
that it makes a black hole in space.
it was impromptu, and you just came up with, when you had to do something, you have to do something.
Miniature black hole.
Where did the spiders come from, Bill?
Pardon me?
Who actually got the spiders? Where did you get the spiders from?
Oh, the tarantulas? Well, Kevin Brody loved spiders. He lived in California. He was not afraid of spiders. We ordered them from I think Steve, Kevin Brody ordered the spiders from a shop in California and brought them out. And our so-called special effects guy that worked on the big spider,
This may be our problem.
he fell in love with those tarantulas. He was starting to train them. He had them crawling up and down his arm, totally unafraid of them. We had him in our kitchen, sitting in our kitchen table for too long. I was always afraid my kids would get into him and, you know, get curious. My wife hated him.
How many were there?
We had five tarantulas, and we accidentally killed 2 or 3 of them. I think the last 2 were given to somebody or given to a pet shop. Now, as you notice, Bob Easton was not the most agile person in the world. He's a very educated, I would call him intellectual individual, not the farm type. He tried to be the Joe Blow farmer, but there was some stiltedness in his movements. I guess the character that he created for himself is another reason why it became what it is, because everybody loves Dan Kester.
Why?
I have an aunt coming in from Wauwatosa.
Well, it's the same aunt as last
Now,
night.
you see, another thing, Christiana Schmidtmer, who was a sex object, when we first engaged her for that role, I anticipate doing a lot more with her because she was built right, let's face it, and she could have contributed a great deal to the picture if it was done properly and developed, her character developed more. Never time to do that, which is pathetic, and I regret not having had the time to develop the characters better. By the way, Paul Benson, who played Cousin Billy here, is a very fine performer and actor. Wisconsin bred and born. He's with the Shakespearean Playhouse now in Spring Green, Wisconsin, still around, and you could talk to him about a scene of what you wanted out of it, what have you. Didn't need a script or anything. He'd remember everything you'd say, and he performed flawlessly.
It's a real diamond.
He did this. There was no script involved here. He talked over the lines. You remember, he got his character straight, and bingo, it was just done impromptu.
Look at it.
How many languages has the film been dubbed into, do you know?
I would think into almost every language.
But only because you're my cousin.
Matter of fact, if you remember, we just talked about the, if it made 22 million at the time by 1976, from then, in the last 30 years, if you count all the re-releases, television worldwide, DVD worldwide, I would make a bet that I can't prove this. I can't hire an accountant or an investigator to prove it, but I would say the picture is probably way over 300 million in revenues all over the world, and still going. I don't know if there are any ways to track anything like that today, but it certainly is enigmatic in every sense of the way.
It's a true cult movie.
Now there's a lot of stuff that I shot myself with a handheld Aeroflex here to get some. I know we needed production values, little action and suspense and intrigue in this thing here, and this is a whole sequence that I added and shot on my own right up to the explosion.
What's the story with the explosion fiasco, Bill?
Pardon me?
What's the story about the explosion fiasco? Wasn't there something where somebody was injured?
Oh, that was at the end of the picture when the spider exploded and imploded. We had Dick Rebane, the special effects guy, had planted the charges all around the spider and inside, and we had a lot of over-anxious grips, young kids from the town of Gleason to help, and they thought we needed some lights set up near the spider for this shot, for the last shot, and I could say, get away from the spiders, those charges are already on there, and the rest of the crew also warned them, don't go that far or close to the spider. Well, one of them did. He tried to get a light stand out of the perimeter of away from the spider. So he ran over to get the light stand, and bingo, the thing exploded, and he got some, I guess, some fur or whatever on his arm, whatever. Had some burn marks, and it wasn't all that serious, but nevertheless, he went to the hospital. The executive producer called the insurance company. The matter was settled. It wasn't all that serious, but it did happen. You know, it's tough to look back and to remember what was actually on paper and what wasn't. But judging by pictures I did before and after dramatic work in film, I know one thing, that I wouldn't have bought the take that you see if it wasn't scripted and it wasn't performed properly. And I could kick myself in the butt for saying, no, this is not going in there. But then again, we had no second, third, or fourth take for anything. And you're stuck with that, and the problem is you're stuck with it for life, whether you like it or not. You can't change what you've done. Especially in this business, where it's all recorded on films. I mean, what are you going to do? You can feel stressed out over it, but it's there, and it's there for everybody to see, and they've seen it so many times all over the world. Thank you. What is the old saying? You are as good as your last picture. There's a lot of stuff that's pretty decent and very effective here, but there's also stuff that you cringe at.
What do you cringe at the most in this picture?
Well, the obvious mistakes, I mean, that are obvious to almost everyone. Maybe some people don't look at them the way I do. But over the years, the longer you're in this business, the more critical, I don't mean to say that I'm a perfectionist all the way, but yeah, there's, you have to be, and you should be, but you can't be if the circumstances are wrong. Unless you tell your producers and your investors, say, I don't like this, this is all stopping, stop the picture, forget it, screw it. Well, you can't do that either. You gotta deliver, you gotta make a picture. Good, bad, or indifferent, you gotta deliver. Money is the solution and answer to these things. Yeah, here's a scene, no planning, no extra. My wife was the production manager. Now she's the person on the cart here. That's why we go out of focus. Oh, this is another wonderful example of a sequence where Steve Brody is 5 sheets to the wind.
Flip-flops. We just brought back what was left of.
He was a great guy, but that booze really screwed things up for him. And Barbara Hale is absolutely fuming because Steve can't remember his lines, and she's a super pro. I mean, she comes, and she's stuck because she doesn't know what the hell she's supposed to do. And so does Alan Hale because he can't figure out what's going on. And you can tell by the expression, spider? 30-foot spider? Are you crazy?
These gizmos. I found them near the corpse.
And then there's the impromptu line.
Found them where?
Near the corpse.
You have a flare gun.
Sheriff, do you mind if we take these and run some...
Came out of nowhere.
Oh, please do.
I don't know where that came out of.
Thank you.
I have no idea what they were going to say.
Yes, you can pick one up. And
Yeah,
do some tests.
yeah, I got one out in the office, he says.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff.
Right.
Cut, get the hell out of here. And this stress here that Alan expresses is real.
Hello. Yes, this is the sheriff.
He didn't know what to do because Steve was so out of it. He screwed up everybody's lines.
Recognize your voice, yes?
And this happened about 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Is Terry all right? We'll have Doc Oliphant.
Now, of course, here we're nearing the end of the picture, and
Keep me filled in on everything.
I remember we had only had so many days of equipment rental, crew contracts, and everything to go. It had to be done. So from here on, everything went haywire. Here again, he forgot the lines, and Barbie, you can read the body language and the facial expression on poor Barbara Hale tell the whole story. And Steve, trying to ad-lib in his drunken stupor here, forgetting his line, doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. It was so frustrating. Again, this gesture of Barbara Hale's is totally real.
Could we soak up the energy?
We could feed it.
Did anyone ever threaten to quit?
We can shower.
No, they were too professional, and we were too close friends with everyone. But we felt the agony within each other, and here's our executive, one of our executive producers, who tried like hell to keep everything together, and but poor Barbara Hale. I understand that years later, about just before she passed away, she told someone that she says she would not ever want to remember the production of Spiders again. But her son, I understand, tried to tell her in her old years that whatever it was, however difficult it was to have to shot that because of her problems with her husband, Bill Williams, and his drinking, and Steve Brody's drinking, it has become a cult classic, and she should take it for what it is, and it really is a success, and she was loved in it. Everybody loved Barbara Hale and Bud Hale. So I think she finally understood what it was all about, that it had to be taken for what it is, rather than for an Academy Award performance, which it was not. So that's about the gist of it. Now here's another totally frustration scene. I said, well, we got to get this done. Get me all the drunks in Gleason, or all the drinkers in Gleason. And this particular saloon was owned by a friend of mine, close friend of mine, who was also in the picture as an extra. And then Stu Taylor is a professional. He was a stuntman for Bat Jack Production, John Wayne. Stu Taylor, I told him, I said, look, his nickname was Babaloo. I said, Babaloo, I said, go out there, give me a scene where you get excited. You're so frustrated when those guys come out of the saloon hell-bent on destroying that spider. You try to stop them. Whatever happens, happens, and that's what happened. And we had no more. It was one take. And I try to take advantage of the local festivities here. And there is at one time, this one side shot, profile shot of the spider in the field coming into the playground there, or a baseball field, actually was passable, I thought. If I could get more of that, it might work. And if we put a lot of people in front of it where we can't see the details of it, that it is a vehicle, we might get away with it. Well, those were my thoughts then, and they're still the same today. But this is not Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's local good stuff here.
Was there any kind of a party or any kind of a public screening in Gleason?
No, not in Gleason. I don't think we even had a premiere screening in Merrill or Lincoln County.
Was there a theater?
No.
No theater.
No, I think the first or the second screening of this picture will be August 6th this year for Crazy Days' 125th anniversary of Merrill, or Lincoln County, I think it is.
In Gleason? Are you sure they're headed this way?
I think from here on, it's pretty much a one-day shoot to finish up. We were under the gun. I said, okay, we're going to get these crowd scenes out of the way, take it into the night.
Hello, operator.
And we had to move the crew and the spider 15 miles from Gleason to Merrill, Wisconsin, where we did the night scene, the ending scene. And I made arrangements for some of my crew to get the extras lined up in Merrill and a crane that could hold the other spider and move it around the corner of a intersection near the theater where the picture is going to be shown again. But they did all of that. But we had a lot of lighting equipment, but we had no place to plug it in and not enough cords to run the proper lights in Merrill. Now this is
Look, honey, it's already happening.
day for night shots.
it easy.
Look at this.
What's the matter? What'd you do?
Even at this point in time, I didn't know
God, another one.
what the exact ending would be of the picture. Again, here the biggest problem for me was Steve being in the sauce so deep that if he would have been himself and sober, I think the actor that he was, he could have pulled it off logically and a lot smoother by and more believable than what it comes off as.
The mobs are beginning to gather and they're getting out of hand.
I think if anything that aggravated his co-professional was his drinking problem. But otherwise, they were tremendous sports. I mean, and it could only happen with old seasoned pros like them. It was a different era. It was a different time. It was a. I mean, look how many pictures these people had made before this, where they had everything laid at their feet. They were used to the studio system, all the gratuities, the amenities, and aesthetic values of everything. And here we were in Wisconsin, and they put up with Bill to put this thing together. That took a lot of guts, and it took a lot of good-naturedness to do that.
What did Alan Hale Jr. think of the final product?
Alan was Alan, and as long as he could do the little old buddy line and be himself of what he is, he loved being the guy from Gilligan's Island. And the frustration, I mean, it's also evident here.
We're setting up the lights around here and the bomb's on its way. And try to keep the spider there.
What screenplay? What lines? I mean, here, what are we doing here?
Sheriff, at least try.
And even the lighting deteriorated because, remember, we had a camera van, and the further it got, a camera van with a porta bar in it, and Carl Kitt, who I could have wanted to fire over and over again, but I couldn't afford it. He broke, I think, two expensive 35 camera cases. No, camera magazines, I'm sorry. He was passing out the booze to everybody in the crew and the cast. So every single take and every shot, with or without good lighting, had to be gotten into the can within a short period of time. And I think this is about the time when I started having a few shots myself, because I couldn't take it anymore. Talk to the crowd. What do you want them to do? Well, here's another impromptu ad-lib scene that I had very little control over. We had talked over what we at least needed to do, and they did it. And remember, Steve Brody is an old Western actor, covered the bad guy pictures. He did some of the strangest and craziest things. And I counted on him to be a pro and be able to ad-lib some of this stuff properly without being soused. And Jack Willoughby, by the way, same thing. He was hitting the hooch too.
Here comes the chopper now.
Now, oddly enough, Stu Taylor, the deputy sheriff that we see here, who gets eaten by the spider, in previous year, he was in, by the way, in Terror at Half Day in Chicago in one of my films, and we were the best of friends in Hollywood. He was a heavy drinker, but throughout the process, throughout this picture, he stayed sober as all hell and helped keep everybody else in line. He was a stunt man for Bat Jack Productions, which is John Wayne's company. And Stu, who was, I thought, the probably as heavy as a drinker as Steve, but he absolutely stayed professional and straight throughout the entire picture. Because whenever he did stunts or had to do anything to do with stunts, which this really wasn't a big stunt, nevertheless, he stayed sober throughout the whole thing and was a great help.
Good boy.
Well, this is where we killed 3 of the 5 spiders in Barbara's briefcase, and she did that by mistake. They were in the briefcase, and she pushed the briefcase off the car, and they hit. And our self-made special effects guy, Bob Millay, who built the spider and loved the little spiders, he went into tears when that happened. And then proceeded to get wiped out of his skull. So, these are... Now here's a good example where we had to stay tight and have the right lighting to... Now this is where Jack Willoughby had already had too many, so I had to do this because I had my own vision how I could possibly make this believable by not overshooting certain things and keeping the frame tight enough so we couldn't see the funny looking globe eyes on it and the spindly legs on the spider too high against the light background. So I stayed as close as, but luckily we had enough light on the blood coming out of there to see at least the... Well, here's the scene where the kid got hurt with that particular light, which wasn't supposed to be in the frame. There was a 2,000 watt light in the frame, which is not supposed to be there. It's a movie light. I mean, why is it in the scene? And the kid tried to get it out of there, and at that time the spider exploded.
No fatalities.
No fatalities.
Except for the spiders.
Yeah, the drunks. Now, after this, the moment this had exploded and imploded, which of course was done optically, the implosion, the reverse of film. But I asked for a couple of fire extinguishers to that where we dyed them with food coloring, and I got into the spider. I took a hatchet and broke the spider eyes and went inside and started pushing out this gook because I hated those 2 bubbles with a passion. I said, we got to do something that looks spacey, gooey, or yucca. So this is the last minute effort to make it look a little bit gooey and yucca. And that's how it happened.
What was the goop made of?
Fire extinguisher foam.
Can it happen again?
Well, as they say, may you forever be looked at again. The giant spider disaster.
Life and locust. It happened before and it will happen again.
So there you got it.